guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be filming my best books. Sorry, I forgot I was on my book channel for a second. I was thinking beauty channel. But my best books of 2020. I absolutely love filming like best of videos. I just think it's super fun and I love talking about books. So we're gonna be talking about all of my absolute favorite books that I read this year, books that I highly recommend to you guys, and I think you guys are going to find some really good books. So I think I read 45 books this year. I think I'm on 44 right now, so 45 by the end of the year probably, maybe 46 if I finish another one. But I'm right in the middle of Stalking Jack the Ripper. So that is kind of the book that I'm reading right now. So we're gonna go ahead and go into the books I read this year, and I'm gonna start from the very beginning of the year to the end of the year and kind of go in that order. So the first book on my list is actually the book that I read, the first book that I read of the year, which is always really, really nice when you start the year off with like a really, really good read, and that is Serpent Dove by Shelby Mahurin. So I picked this book out for my book club, so a lot of you guys read this book with me. I know some people loved it and some people didn't love it. I was definitely in the mood for like a hate to love, like really heavy romance type of book, and that's definitely what I got with this. It definitely gives you that really heavy romance, and it's the hate to love trope, which is awesome. But not only that, I really loved the character development that she did in this book. I thought the characters really grew a lot in this book, and I love to see the transformation of Lou and Reed in this book. I think it was really, really well done. And I also love the side characters in this book. She did a really good job, I felt like, at developing the side characters and making you like the side characters, which was really awesome. And also, I love that this was new adult, which I feel like publishers are starting to finally understand the importance of new adult and that we need more new adult. And I love this because it felt very young adult, but it definitely had like the vulgarity and kind of the smut that you would find in a new adult, which I appreciate because I love young adult stories, but I love kind of the new adult feel or characters that are a little bit older because I'm obviously not a teenager, and so I feel like I'm getting really, really, really tired of teen characters in books, and because this is a new adult, they're kind of, I think, more in like their early 20s. Really love this, definitely a best book of the year. I loved it so much. So the next book on this list is a book that I actually don't have with me because I got this book from the library, but it was An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. This book was so good, you guys. If you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. I thought it was so well done, and it's a very, very tangible sci-fi. Like, it's a sci-fi that's not too out of this world crazy. It definitely feels like it's written in a young adult style, but all the characters are older. They're in their 20s, so it's an adult fantasy, but it feels more young adult. So this is a great book series to kind of go into if you're kind of afraid to kind of jump into the sci-fi thing or you're used to reading young adult. This is a great one. I was so interested and fascinated in this book. I thought that Hank Green did such an amazing job at making me like want to know what was going on. Like, I was always so curious and just wanting to figure things out and like understand what was happening in this book. It was one of those books where you're just so intrigued to just learn and find out what is going on. And I felt like he did such a good job with that, and I loved the characters in this book. I just loved everything that he did. I feel like Hank Green is a very intelligent guy, and he is very intelligent when it comes to like science-based things, and so I feel like everything was very realistic, and I felt like, well, realistic for like a fantasy sci-fi type of thing, but you know what I mean. Like, he explained why things were the way that they were. Like, he didn't just say something was that way and then not give you a reason for it. He always made sure like things made sense, which I think is very important in like a sci-fi novel. This first one, I definitely like the first one a little bit, just a little bit more than the second one. I still love the second one, but I think enjoy the first one just a little bit more. I feel like it was a little more fast-paced than the second one, but I'm telling you guys, if you want a good sci-fi, definitely check these out. They're fantastic. So the next book on this list is The Speed of Falling Objects by Nancy Richardson Fisher. I also do not have this book because I listened to this on audio. And this book is about a girl who is afraid of everything, and she ends up going with her dad, who she doesn't know very well. Her parents got a divorce. She goes with her dad on this like excursion into the Amazon rainforest, but then their plane crashes and they end up stranded in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, and they have to survive, which is crazy because the Amazon rainforest is a very, very deadly place. Like, if you know anything about the Amazon rainforest, it's so fascinating and so interesting. But this was a really good book, especially if you read it on audio, because I felt like it kept me really invested. This was a very fast-paced book. So a lot of stuff is going on. Obviously they're surviving, and so there's a lot of crazy things happening to them. But the other really great thing about this book was the relationship between the main character and her dad, and kind of seeing that evolve and kind of seeing her come to acceptance about things and all that kind of thing. Like, I felt like the main character made a lot of progress and growth within herself, you know, in this book, which I always think makes for a really good book when you see growth in the characters. And I felt like she really did. This was just a really entertaining and I think well done read. The only thing that I didn't love about this book was the romance. I felt like the romance was just a little bit unbelievable, and I just didn't care really that much about the romance, which is odd for me, being that I love romance. But I kind of felt like the romance was just kind of unnecessary, like it didn't need to be in there, you know? But it was fine that it was. I just didn't feel like it was like the most epic romance of all time. But it was still a really good book. Like, if you like survival stories and you like survival stories in fiction, I highly recommend this. And I think it's really realistic too, because I think that the Amazon rainforest has a lot of crazy things living in there, and it's really hard for humans to survive in the Amazon rainforest. So in that way, I do think it was pretty realistic, and I actually learned a lot by reading this book too. So I highly recommend this. I know this wasn't talked about too much on BookTube. Like, I haven't seen anybody talk about this book, but it was really good, so I highly recommend it. The next book is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. This book was really good. It's a really, really fast read, but I highly recommend it if you want something kind of like dark and creepy, kind of spooky, but cozy at the same time. This definitely gives you like middle grade creep vibes. Like, it's definitely one of those just weird books. Like, I feel like Tim Burton, like, claymation thing, kind of like Coraline or something like that. I feel like this book would really fit into like that genre. I really like this. I just felt so cozy while reading it, and I feel like he had a really good way of immersing me into the story. Like, I felt like I was there and I could like picture everything. And I loved the main character in this. Like, he was a young boy, he was like 7, he didn't have a name, he was like a nameless character. But I wanted to protect this boy so much. Like, there were so many times, and I don't know if it's because I'm like a mom, that could definitely be it. I just wanted to like scoop him up and just hug him and help him and just like be like, everything's gonna be okay. Like, there was just something about this character that like I could feel deep in my bones of just wanting to protect him, and I feel like he got some of that with some of the characters in this book. And I don't know, I just think that this is a really good book, and it needs to be made into like a claymation type of thing. I just think it would be really good, and yes, this is a great book. I highly recommend it. So the next book is by my all-time favorite author, or one of my all-time favorite authors, and I just absolutely loved this book. When I read it so fast, especially when I got to the kind of end of the book. I read a majority of the end of this book in one sitting because it was that intense and amazing. And that's saying a lot because this book is like 800 pages. So it is Crescent City, or House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas, and it was so good. Now, there were some aspects of this book that I was like, so on. I do feel like the beginning of this book is a little on the slow side. You definitely have to push through on some parts, especially at the beginning. She really focuses on world building and stuff like that. And then I also kind of felt like I was a little bit confused at times. There's a lot of like things in this book that are connected, and I feel like she didn't come straight out and explain everything sometimes, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think because this is an adult book, you know, it's not just served to you on a silver platter all of the time, which is a good thing. You know, she doesn't treat us like we're idiots, but for some reason I kind of felt like an idiot sometimes reading this, because I was like, wait a second, like, so this happened because of this, so did she do this because of this? And I kind of felt like I was a little bit confused at times. I don't know if I'm the only one that felt that way, but for some reason I like wasn't quite grasping a few things for some reason. But other than that, I absolutely loved it. Like, it all comes together at the end, and the end is so intense and so fun to read. I just sat in my bed all afternoon and read the end of this book, and I don't usually do that. It takes a lot to get me so invested in a book that I just sit and read it all in one sitting, and this book did it for me. And there's something about Sarah J. Maas that I love when it comes to her characters. I don't know what it is about Sarah J. Maas's skill with writing characters. There's not very many authors, I feel like, that can do this, and Sarah J. Maas is one of them. Taylor Jenkins Reid is another one, where you feel like these characters are like so real in your head, and like you know them, you know what I mean? And she does that with every single one of her characters in all of her books. I just feel like I know them. They're so clear in my head. And that is how I feel like the characters were in this. Every single one. Even the side characters that we only met for like a little bit. They felt so real. And that's why I love Sarah J Maas. She just has a way of doing that for me. And I absolutely fell in love with almost every single character in this book. And it's just a really, really, really fantastic book. I cannot wait to read the second one. I think it comes out later next year, I think. So the next book is a book that is also not loved by everybody. I feel like this is a hit or miss type of book, but for me, it was a hit. I really enjoyed it, and that was The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. This book definitely made me want to pick up more Trisha Levenseller. I really, really liked it, and I've talked about in past videos, I'm not going to talk about it too much again, but this was one of those books that was extremely fast-paced, perfect for somebody that wants a really fantasy-ish book, but like quick and to the point. It's short, so you're not gonna have to deal with a ton of world building. It just like gets to the freaking point. And sometimes I want fantasy so badly, but I just don't wanna like work through all the world building sometimes. Don't get me wrong, I do like a good world building type of book, but this was just quick and to the point. The world building wasn't intense, and it was just like a fantasy world without the fantasy build-up, which I really appreciated. And it's heavy romance, and I just really liked it. Like, if you're looking for that specific thing in a book, quick and to the point, but also fantasy, this is your jam. And it also has a good romance in it. Like I said, I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but for me, it's almost like I just found what I needed at the time. And I think that that's key sometimes with books. When you find a book that fits what you need for that moment in time, and it just works, that is what this was for me at the time. This almost felt like a villain backstory, like how a villain would get their role as queen, right? Like, the two main characters in this book are villainish. They're definitely Slytherins. They're definitely like unhealthy Enneagram 3s. This is like a villain backstory, I think. And so I feel like that is kind of an interesting setup, because I feel like oftentimes you're reading about, unless you're reading a villain backstory, a lot of times you're reading about good characters or characters that are really, really like good people that are trying to save their kingdom or whatever. This wasn't really like that. These characters aren't really that moral, and that's why I liked it. It was just different, and it felt different to me. So the next book that made it to this list was Bloodwater Paint by Joy McCulley. This is not a book that's talked about a lot on BookTube. I feel like I've seen a couple people talk about it, but it's definitely not heavily discussed. But this is a book about Artemisia Gentileschi and kind of how she became a famous artist. She made these beautiful, stunning works of art, but she had to sign them under her father's name because she was a woman, and so she had to paint under her dad's name, which is ridiculous and sad. But then she ended up apprenticing under this guy who was like a really, really good painter, and he ends up raping her. And it's kind of talking about how she fights the system to get people to believe her, because people just didn't believe women back then. And this is kind of like her story, and it's so good, and it's written in verse, which is really fun and really interesting. If you guys have never read a book in verse, they're really good, and this is really well done. It's just a really good book, you guys. I highly recommend it. And Artemisia Gentileschi, if you've never seen her art, like, it's beautiful. She was an amazing painter, and this book is so good. Like, I'm surprised more people haven't talked about this, because I do think it's an amazing read. So the next book is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. This was an amazing book. This came out in 2019. This made a lot of people's 2019 Best Books of the Year videos, and this is a great book. Like, if you're looking for something that just makes you feel good, right, with good characters, a good couple that just like work together really well, this is the one for you. Like, if you're just looking for a good romance, this is the one. And not only that, it takes place in Hawaii, which you guys know I'm a big Hawaii person. Like, I love Hawaii. We're always traveling to Hawaii. So the fact that this takes place in Hawaii was really, really fun. And I just liked the characters. I enjoyed their dynamic, and it just made for a really fun romance to read. And I was like rooting for them, which I really love when I'm actually really, truly rooting for a couple. Like, there's sometimes where I read a romance and I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I hope they end up together. But with this one, I was like, I really want them to end up together, you know? So I really like this. I thought it got a little bit long by the end. There was definitely a point at the end where they dragged it. They dragged it out, and I'm just kind of like, okay, like, this doesn't really need to keep going. Like, let's just kind of wrap this up. Like, we all know where it's gonna go, so let's just like get to the point already. And so I feel like this didn't have to be quite as long as it was, especially near the end. But other than that, like, great book, great romance, highly recommend it. It was just really, really good, and I would definitely recommend it. I think this was part of the book club, so a lot of you guys probably read it with me, but if you're new to this channel, then read it. So the next book is probably my favorite book of the entire year. You guys know what I'm gonna say, but this is definitely my favorite book of the year, I think. This stuck with me so much for some reason, and I have to say, before anybody says anything, not everybody feels this way about this book. I know a lot of people, when they read this, they're kind of like, that was like good, but it wasn't anything like mind-blowing. But for me personally, I just loved it. It just gave me the feels, and I just really truly loved this book for whatever reason. I think it's just my life circumstances, where I live, the things that I've experienced. This book just kind of like fit into what my life has been up until this point. It just makes sense that I would like it. But like I said, not everyone loves this, so don't get like your expectations like through the roof with it, but just know that it's like my favorite book of the year. And that's Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I just talked about it in a video, but it's so good. It just has those coastal, nautical, lighthouse, creepy witch vibes, and everything is just misty and cold and gloomy and just fantastic, and I loved it. The only thing this book needed was just more pages. Not because I was liking it so much, but because I feel like she could have elaborated a bit on the romance. I felt like the romance was a little bit like insta-lovey, which you kind of have to do that a little bit when the book is short. Like, this is not a long book, and I feel like she wanted to keep it short, but I do feel like this book needed to be a little bit longer because I think that the romance needed to kind of blossom a little bit more, and I think it would have added so much to this story. This is definitely a book that would have done better with more pages, and that's rare for me to say. I don't usually say that. I usually say books could have been shorter because I feel like sometimes authors just filler write because they want their books to be long. This one needed more pages, I think. But other than that, I just loved it. I loved the vibe of it. And there was a character in this book that I really, really loved. I'm not gonna say who it is because I don't want to give anything away, but I just love this book. I can't wait to read it again. I want to read it next year around Halloween. This isn't like a fall read. It actually takes place in the summer, but it feels fallish, if you know what I mean. Like, the vibe of it feels fallish. But I can't wait to read this again. Like, I just really want to read this again. So, love this so much. 5 stars. So the next book is a book that I got from the library, and so I don't have it with me right now, but it's called Sheets, and this is a graphic novel. This was freaking adorable, okay? This isn't a book that's gonna be like, oh my god, that's gonna stick with me forever, or that has like such a deep meaning. It's nothing like that. Like, it's a pretty basic book, but it is so adorable. Like, I couldn't get over how cute this book was. This is like about a ghost and this girl who meet in this laundromat, and it's kind of like a Casper-y type of story, and it is just adorable. Like, so adorable. I couldn't get over how just cute the story was. It's probably one of the cutest things I've ever read, and I loved it. I just loved it. And I think the next one is coming out next year, or maybe it's already out, but the second one is coming out really soon, and I can't wait to read it because I just think it's so cute. Like, this is actually a graphic novel that I would like to own because I think it's that cute. And I don't buy graphic novels about that often because they're just something that I don't feel like I need, especially if I'm not going to reread them again. But this is one that I feel like I would reread just out of cuteness, you know what I mean? And then my last favorite book of the year was one that I read very recently, and it is The Chaos of Standing Still by Jessica Brody. This is a book that was actually recommended by Haley in Bookland, and she raves about this book a lot. I don't see anybody talking about this book, but I was so into this book. This was a really, really, really good book. So I talked a little bit about this in, what book? Oh, I think it was a book haul that I talked about this. But it's basically about a girl who loses her best friend. Her best friend dies, and she has one unread message on her phone, like text message on her phone from her best friend, and she will not read it because she feels like her best friend is still there, like if she doesn't read it. So it's New Year's Eve, and her best friend died a year prior on New Year's Day. So she is stuck at an airport by herself, and it's snowy, and so there's no airplanes going out, and she feels like she has to get home because her best friend, the anniversary of her best friend's death is the next day, and she does not want to be in the airport for that. And she ends up meeting this guy in the airport, and they end up spending the entire time kind of just like hanging out because they like switch phones. And this is just a good book. Like, this is another book that would make a really good movie, I feel like. It would make a good teen movie. It's kind of hard-hitting, to be honest. Like, the grief that she feels in this book is so tangible, and I feel like the author did such a good job at formatting this book because I don't usually love books that go from present to past tense, where you kind of jump back and forth. But this book, it was so good because she jumped back to times when her and her best friend were together, but she also jumped back in time to when she was in therapy, so trying to work through her grief. And because of this format, you really understood her connection with her best friend and why she was grieving so bad. And you felt almost like you were grieving right along with her, which I think was so important because you were being shown versus being told that she was grieving, which was incredibly important for this book. It would not have been the same without that kind of showing, not telling type of aspect. But at the very end of this book, I think it just really hit home when she kind of came to terms with certain things and everything kind of comes full circle and she kind of understands like how to cope, and it's just a really well done book. It is a romance, but like it's a well done romance in a way. I feel like they don't just fall like instantly in love with each other, but it's like this cute kind of slow burn friendship that's kind of has the feels going on, and it's just a really good book. I think that the author is very talented at writing, and I would definitely read more books by her because I think she knows what she's doing. Like, she knows what she's doing. Like, you know when you can tell when an author kind of is aware of like how to plot a story to make it make sense and make it work? She knows what she's doing, I feel like. So this was a really good book. I highly recommend it. I think it's really great, and yeah. That is it, you guys, for my best books of 2020. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you agreed with me on any of these or disagreed with me. And also in the comments, let me know what your all-time favorite book of the year was. Like your favorite book that you read this year, if you had to pick one. I'd be very curious to know. So that is it, you guys. I'm gonna go eat some lunch because I'm starving. But I think that's it. So I will talk to you guys in my next video, which is gonna be my worst books of 2020, which I have some tea. I read a book recently that I am still bitter about, that I haven't talked to you guys about yet. So anyways, I will talk to you guys in my next video, and I hope you have a good day. Bye.